Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the May meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board. I think first call is roll call, right? Yes, may I have roll call?
Director Hoffman.
Here.
Director Adams.
Here.
Director Edwards.
Here.
Director Evans.
Here.
Director Byrne.
Here.
Director Riley.
Here.
And Director Potter is not here this evening.
Okay,
Or has not arrived yet.
or he's not here yet. Okay, great, we'll find out then. Okay, if you'll stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to see if there's anything on the, any changes or modifications to the agenda. There's not. Okay. Would anybody like to pull anything from the agenda for, or, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd like to open up the floor for oral communications. Any member of the public wishing to address the board on any items on consent, information items, closed sessions, or matters not listed on the agenda may do so at this time.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Paul Bruno, resident of Monterey. I'd like to start by, I'm going to slightly modify a quote from Ronald Reagan. I think that is very applicable today. The problem with our public water now friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Case in point is a recent letter to the Monterey Herald by Chuck Check. Not only was it in the paper, but it was also widely distributed by Ron Weitzman. I'm not going to bore you by rereading the letter. I will say that in the letter, Mr. Check alleges that the new 36-inch pipeline, quote, could not perform as well as the original 16-inch line. He blames a hydraulic trough. He rounds out his attack by saying that, how can we trust CalAm to build a desal plant if they cannot build a properly functioning pipeline? The problem is that his facts are all wrong. To quote Reagan, he knows so much that isn't so. Those who know me know that I know quite a bit about pipelines. Trust me when I say that the transmission line does work. That the pump stations, they do work. It all works as designed. It has the capacity to convey significantly greater quantities of water than the existing pipeline ever could have. In an act of desperation, the Public Water Now folks are trying to spin the success as a failure. Unfortunately, they're just plain wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. Anybody else wishing to address the board? Okay, we'll close the oral communications part of the meeting, and we move on to the consent calendar.
Are you asking if anything's been pulled?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we should start this meeting over. So I'm moving on to the consent calendar. Is there anything? Would anybody like to pull any items for further discussion?
Chair, item 3 and 6.
3 and 6 will be pulled for further consideration. Any other directors? Any members of the public wishing to pull anything from the consent calendar for further discussion? Okay, then.
I make a motion to approve the remaining consent calendar with the exception of 3 and 6.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Director Byrne and a second from Director Riley to approve the consent calendar items minus items 3 and 6. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 3.
Stephanie, are you here to speak on item 3? Is there a specific question?
Yeah. So the reason why I pulled this item is I think that I wanted to highlight the excellent work that the conservation program is doing here at the district. I don't think it gets credit it deserves in reducing water usage. There's a report at the back of our agenda package, so it's kind of buried at the end. And I think that it's important to recognize, for example, the item that's on our agenda this evening is going to reduce the use of water at the International School of Monterey by, if I'm not mistaken, 3.1 acre feet per year. That goes along with the additional 4 acre feet that's being reduced based on our rebate programs throughout this year. So I think that we spend a lot of time talking about other stuff, and water supply is critical, but the cheapest way to get additional water supplies is to conserve. And I look forward to working with Stephanie and her staff to find more innovative ways to get more disadvantaged households, actually, as well as non-CalAm pumpers in Carmel Valley to conserve better in the future. So really, I just wanted to say, thanks for you guys' hard work.
Thank you, Director Hoffman.
And if I could add, we appreciate the partnership with California American Water in continuing to budget for the rebates.
Can we act on 3? May I have a motion for item 3?
Approve item 3.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Adams and a second from Director Edwards. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 6.
Yes, so item 6, which begins at page 27 of the board packet, we tried to craft as confusingly as humanly possible, and I believe we've succeeded.
Job well done.
Was there an actual question on 6?
Yeah, so I was going to
Did you
ask
pull
us
that? Oh.
a question or two. We'd be happy to take them.
Okay. So, was it on? Okay. So, as I read this, we're looking to give a loan to the Carmel Area Wastewater District for maintenance on one of their storage tanks. And so my first question is the Carmel Area Wastewater District under any compliance order or imminent threat that the facilities will be incapacitated and no longer be able to perform? That was my first question.
The answer is no, and it's so this particular component element is actually owned by Pebble Beach Community Services District. Carmel Area Wastewater District holds all of the funds for the reclamation project. The reclamation project is actually an enterprise fund wholly incorporated into our financials. So I said it's as confusing as I can make it. So by way of history, the district financed all of the reclamation project components without ownership of a single one of them back in 1992. We own the water, and we sell the water in what's called an installment purchase agreement, which basically creates an asset by which you can be compensated. And in the case of 1992, we, the district, not having $34 million to put into the project, went out to the capital markets and raised it. But then when we sell the reclaimed wastewater to the 7 golf courses in the school, we receive the water rate back and therefore get the principal and interest payments that we then turn back over through the trustee to the bondholders. COD's ownership, Carmel Area Wastewater District, is pretty much the treatment plant. PBCSD owns the pipes inside the Del Monte Forest and the tanks. And I don't know if it's ownership or through a lease with the old CalAm Forest Lake Reservoir. And so whenever the reclamation project needs to make an investment for renewal and replacement or new facilities, it's either budgeted in the then current water rate or it's financed. And in this case, because the 1.6 million was deemed to be too much to put into a single annual budget, and in the water rate, we're splitting it across 3 fiscal years. And we are acting as principal to do the project financing. And we calculated our opportunity cost of using internal funds based on, 2-year negotiable CD plus 0.5%. So it looks just like the reclamation project financing from the 90s, except that we're internally funding it and then getting repaid through water rates rather than going out to the bond market, which might make you think it looks like a loan, but it's, when you're a project partner, and it's also our enterprise fund, it's more of an interfund transfer with an interest component upon the repayment. I don't know if you got anything better, Mr. CFO?
It's in the fund transfer.
Yeah.
Can I
You may continue.
Oh,
Okay.
and there is no imminent regulatory action because the reclamation project, COD just went through a big rehab for which cash was used. The headworks at the Forest Lake Reservoir have been redone through, there is a budgeted amount of renewal and replacement funds, but it's only 800,000 or so. Yeah. So for this one, I'll get this wrong, the Finance Officers Working Group, okay, FOG, met to discuss how to set rates for next year, the same issue fiscal year. And this item has been deferred, and they wanted to find if there was a way to get it done, because we're 25 years into the project at this point.
So on the agenda item, it indicates that it's budgeted, but I looked at both the 18-19 budget and the proposed 19-20 budget, and I don't see where this loan was identified as an item in either budget. So
You
if
mean
could
the
explain-
inter-fund transfer?
I'm sorry, what?
It's not a loan.
It was not a loan.
Yeah, I'll say
Well-
project financing, it has different earmarks depending on your frame of reference, but it looks loan-like because we're lending ourselves money to do the project and we're getting it repaid through the water rates, so. But it's tantamount to the same thing we did with Pure Water Monterey, except we didn't have an interest component. When we bought this building, we went from other funds that we had to buy the building and then repaid those funds over time and did offsetting entries. I think that has it changed in the way we're representing it here in the proposed budget, and why don't you deal with this one?
Yeah, Director Hoffman, it is in the proposed 2019-2020 budget. It's on page 268. You will see towards the very bottom part of the page, you will say reclamation project, $1 million in the proposed 1920 column.
Yeah, and here it was done basically in the, with all the reserves, so kind of on the balance sheet side.
Because it's a interfund transfer, because the reclamation project sits on our financial statements as a component unit to the district, so basically it becomes the district's enterprise fund. And so if you transfer money, this sort of transactions are considered an interfund transfer, and so that's what you'll see when we close the books and the financial statements are prepared and presented. You'll see towards the bottom part of the transactions, they'll say interfund transfer from one fund to another.
So along those lines, as I read the one-page agreement, it says that on November 1, 2019, proceeds are to be delivered to the Calma Area Wastewater District
Right.
for the benefit of the reclamation project. So just that language in and of itself does not indicate that it's an inter-fund transfer. It actually, so let me have a follow-up question to that, and that is, so who has financial control over the disbursement of those funds for any work that's done or not done?
That's Carmel Area Wastewater District. What we do is we collect the revenues, all the water sales, and we transfer it over to COD simply because COD's been in the operating mode of the accounts.
they basically do the payments
They're
in
the
and out.
fiscal agent for the reclamation project.
Right, but we do collect all the revenues and we transfer it to COD. And staff does prepare a report and present it to this board every 6 months, where basically we show all the transactions in and out of the project.
And then COD and PVCSD also will, during the budget setting process, will receive or be designated responsible parties for different capital improvements. And so when it's a PVCSD, Pebble Beach Community Services District, they're actually getting remittances, or they'll invoice the project, and COD will reimburse them. So it's a, you have 4 parties and a bank that this is how it ended up.
But, you know, in this case, I mean, just based on the funding agreement, it's not about taking in revenues. It's about us, the district, allocating funds alone to the wastewater agency, and then the wastewater agency then having authority on how those funds are distributed, and that we don't have any role in the disbursement of the funds or what they're spent on. Is that not a correct statement?
We don't have direct control on the accounts as to who they pay, but we do have control on the financial statements for the project itself. We do get the draft financial statements. We do review the audits. Our auditors do review it. So at some point, there is some checks and balance that goes through the process.
But there's no, when you say it's just an interfund transfer, it gives the impression that we somehow are just moving it on paper from one account of our own to another. But in fact, the money is actually going to the Carmel Area Wastewater District, and then they have sole discretion on how those funds are spent, right?
Correct.
Well, within the
No.
context of the reclamation project budget. So
Right.
somebody's tracking the project, there'll be design, bid, hiring a firm, and then there'll be progress payments, and at the end, we'll see how it gets closed out. And if it's more than 1.6 million, they're gonna have to find the money elsewhere within the reclamation project budget in some subsequent fiscal year. And if it's less than, then there'll be a residual that can be rolled into the renewal and replacement fund. But either way, the obligation is out of this year's budget, there will be 600,000 pay-as-you-go. Next year's budget, there will be a repayment of 5 million, and then in the third fiscal budget, there will be repayment of 5 million, so that they could spread this roughly.
500,000.
Yeah, 500,000, half a million, so they could spread this across 3 years. And so, and the only way that comes back is it's not COD writing us a check, it's him collecting monthly revenues from the 7 golf courses and Stevenson School. And then I guess we'll either remit the entire thing and take a check back, which is the most likely, so that it stays within the fiscal agent's booking for audit purposes. But, you know, we could pull it out before we remit the water revenues to the project. We tend to use the fiscal agent for the reclamation project to just, everything goes in, everything comes out. It's not, so it won't even be their project ownership on their site. It'll be, as I mentioned earlier, PVCSD's project ownership on their properties.
But the 1.6 million is designated for this specific tank replacement, so
Correct.
it's not like anybody is taking that and waltzing off to do some other project. It's
Right.
already designated and allocated for that
And if we
specific
deliver the
purpose.
proceeds November 1st, and one of the reasons for that was to get it straddling into the right future fiscal years, and they get a delay or they aren't happy with the bids for whatever reason, we're still going to recover it out of rates because it's going into the next year's rate setting and the following year's rate setting. So it, you know, it could end up missed time, but the idea was they were going to go out to bid this autumn and then complete it during the pre-irrigation season. which means they've got a window of maybe 4 or 5 months through the winter. And then the production starts ramping up. The key thing is to be able to fill the reservoir, the open reservoir. It's less key to fill the tank, but that is our water sitting in their tank, and so we want to see it get done in that time frame, and that's what PBCSD says they're going to do.
Thank you, Chair. Have we done this before?
Using our
Have
own
we
funds?
have we loaned them money before?
For maintenance work?
We haven't loaned them, we've transferred money.
Or transferred money, or
Yeah,
have
well,
we?
33.9 million in 1992, and that's basically our money that we borrowed. And
Right.
so it comes into us, and then we put it into the project account for construction.
Okay, have they ever been late?
No.
Have we ever had a problem with them?
No, it's
Okay.
always paid on time.
Always paid on time. Okay. That's all I got.
So have we ever paid or loaned money to any other agency for maintenance work?
Not to my recollection. We have
Um,
done other project financing.
If I may, are you referring to a project in which we are a partner, or just a random project that we are loaning money for a maintenance on? Because we are a project partner in the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project, so it is
and
well
this one
within
kind
our.
of crosses the line between maintenance and renewal and replacement too. It's, it
But the
smells
difference
a
is
little bit
we're
like both.
partners in this.
Yeah, this
We're
is
not-
this is
isn't
our
a
project.
random loan or grant.
Right, and
Correct.
where we're heading in the project is, because of its age, the things that are gonna need to be fixed are gonna be bigger. And so it's gonna move from just small-scale renewal and replacement or annual maintenance to larger scale. And they're gonna have to figure out how to fund some of the larger items if, in fact, they come home to roost. I mean, right now, I think I may have mentioned at AdCom that they've got a piece of the pipeline cathodically protected to keep it from rusting or decomposing over time, but not all of it is. There's some pump stations that, they do a regular cycle, but there are things that will start to fail, and that just happens. So I think this will not be the only time that the project's gonna be stuck with a significant single-year capital need. And so the hope is to get through the payment of the bonds, which is 2023, and then what you would have been spending for the same water rate on debt service, you now roll into a fund to pre-fund replacement, but that's still 3 years away.
Just a question, or for confirmation, if the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project was not going on today, how much potable water would that be taking out of the system?
About 1,000 acre feet.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this item 6.
Yeah, well, I'm not done with my questioning, though, Jeannie, so if you wouldn't mind indulging me for a couple more questions.
Put the motion on hold.
So you indicated that the project wasn't necessary for any kind of compliance thing. There's no imminent failure. So why don't we trust the Carmel Area Wastewater District and their ability to finance and budget for their maintenance projects and not get involved in being the bank for the peninsula for other agencies?
Well, this facility, again, is Pebble Beach Community Services District. I think at your FOG meeting, it was asked of their CFO if they would fund it up. And keep in mind, these are 4 project partners in the same project, and so this is a little bit what our role has been traditionally. The security for the bonds, by California law, has to be this installment purchase agreement for the water. So we have to own and sell the water on installment. But PBCSD did not step through that door to say, well, let's fund $1 million.
And just one more question, and that is, has the Carmel Area Wastewater District Board approved of asking this request of us through an agenda item and at their Board of Directors meeting?
No. So again, the reclamation project is an entity unto itself. COD serves as fiscal agent for the reclamation project, but all those monies are reclamation project monies. And all those activities are for the enterprise fund that is the reclamation project. Water rate setting is an annual event. Budget setting is an annual event, just happened. That's why this is here now. And it was approved, so there's different committees for the reclamation project. There's a technical advisory committee, there's a reclamation management committee. There is a committee of superintendents that get together and talk about voluntary rationing if the supplies are down. And there's the FOG, which we mentioned earlier. So they do the budget setting, the review of the annual audits and so forth, but it's, again, inside the reclamation project group. So that management committee met last week, considered this set of terms and approved it contingent upon our board's approval. And that committee is comprised of 2 directors of COD, 2 directors of Pebble Beach Community Services District, 1 representative of the company, and 1 representative of the end users. And so that's the committee that approved, signs off on the budget, approved this, and so forth. So it's not COD's board.
So COD's board hasn't taken any action to request this loan.
Because it's not a loan to COD, it's a loan to the reclamation project that COD administers. And they charge something for their annual financial administration.
All the project partners charge a minimal fee, administrative fee,
Yeah.
including ourselves. We also bill the project as well for taking care of the billing, doing the collections, and sending them a bill at the end of the year. So does COD and so does PBCSD.
Yeah, just my confusion is that the agreement says delivered to the Carmel Area Wastewater District, and it says agreed to by the parties below, and yet there's only one party listed, and I don't know who the other party to this agreement is.
The version that their board saw, the Reclamation Management Committee has a separate signature line. It's already been signed pending your approval, and they know that if it doesn't get approved, it's done. And that was signed by David Hoyk, the Executive VP for Finances at Pebble Beach Company, on behalf of the RMC.
And on the Reclamation Committee, there is no representation by this district?
We don't have a vote.
So this group decided how best to finance their maintenance without our having a vote on the issue.
Yeah, they didn't really decide it. We kind of offered up that it could happen, that we have currently, right now, we have the wherewithal to do so. I don't think PBCSD really had the wherewithal or the desire to do so, but there was a bunch of finance guys sitting around at their meeting saying, how can we do this? Because we clearly can't put it into the water rates for 1 year and then drop back down the following year. And I believe one of the CFOs said, heck no. And one of the CFOs said, it sounds like something we might be able to do, and offered to the Pebble Beach Company that we would take a look at it. And as I said, it's been somewhat of the traditional role that we've taken on. Sometimes it looks like we're being the bank to everybody, but these are projects that we've got a vested interest. We're not just lending. We wanted the 1,000 acre-feet of savings. That's why we grabbed onto that role. They were originally planning this project without us back in the 90s.
So we have a motion on the floor. We have a motion from Director Byrne and a second from Director Adams. So, all those in favor?
Well, no,
Aye.
I think,
Aye.
pardon, order, because after the motion, then there's asked for discussion.
I'm sorry, is there further discussion, Director Hoffman?
Yeah, I just want to point out to the board that this is a slippery slope that the board's considering, in that where we have funded in the past or made loans to the reclamation project for construction of facilities, this is the first time that we're now getting involved in financing maintenance of facilities. And Jeannie, I think you misspoke and you said it's replacement of the storage tank. That's not what's being considered here. This is a maintenance project. And so consider the fact that it opens up a door for other water agencies within our jurisdiction to come to us, like the city of Seaside. If they need tank maintenance, we can get cheap financing and come to the Water Management District, because their rates that they're going to charge us for the money are significantly lower than what they could go to the market to get. So I'm just
I
wanted
think
to point out that
your
it's-
point
this
is noted, Director Hoffman, but I hope you remember that this is a project, a water supply project that the district has been a partner in for almost 30 years. And I think that as an entity that wants to see supply on the peninsula, it is incumbent on us to do what we can to keep this project up and running. And if that is to participate in the maintenance of a project, of a tank that holds the water that we own and sell, it is in our interests to keep that supply project going. That's 1/10 of our annual demand right there, 1,000 acre feet. That's a significant chunk of a project for $1 million that we are giving as a partner in this project. It is not some random request by an agency, water or otherwise, for cheap money.
I would like to follow up that, because I think Director Hoffman probably hasn't been here long enough to have seen all of this develop. And the fact that the Water Management District is here to provide water solutions. We're not a for-profit agency. We're not looking at collecting interest. We're here to further water projects. And that's what we've done with this project, with the PG Reclaimed Water Project, with the Pure Water Monterey project. That is our purpose, and I think maybe you're looking at the agency as a profit organization, which we are not.
And did we run this through the auditors?
Yes, Director Edwards, we did run it through the auditors, and the auditors are in concurrence with what staff's observation, which is basically this is an interfund transfer. This is not a loan.
Okay, thank you.
Make a comment too. If you're concerned about slippery slope, that may be a goals issue about the future, but not about the current project. And that'd be a place to raise what we should be looking out for, as opposed to what we want to accomplish, but what we want to avoid, if that's in the ballpark of what goals are about.
Yeah, and even though the interfund transfer aspect gives you a certain level of, or should give you a certain level of comfort, there are public agencies that put money into projects that they don't own, through JPAs, through, in our case with Pure Water Monterey, it was just through an agreement that, has been amended 3 times, but funding agreement. So there's different ways things like this can happen. We're not the bank for some agency to come to and say, hey, you got some money sitting around that you can lend us, and we're also not in the gift to public funds business. So, when we do those grants, no interest component. When we did the building, there was an interest component, but sometimes you can't get the interest. We don't even get the full reimbursement back from Pure Water Monterey because the state revolving fund loan isn't big enough. And so not only was there no interest component, we won't get back everything we put in, even through the water rates, because the water rates will pay back the state revolving fund loan. But if the state revolving fund loan is limited and didn't produce enough to reimburse fully, then that money that we've spent is just gone. It's not getting reimbursed through the water rates. So there's different elements, but these are all for projects in which we see a benefit to the system. So we've done some of the local grant programs to free up potable supply so that things can happen here with the moratorium, or in this case, as a project partner.
Well, also, this project was one of the first that was a giant step forward in terms of solving the CDO, moving a water project forward with the community. And all of the community has benefited by this.
Yeah, I just want to follow up and say, I don't, you're absolutely right that this project, the construction of this project was hugely important in deferring potable water use in the Pebble Beach area. No question about that. The issue that I have is us getting involved in financing maintenance costs and not facilities costs of increasing water supply.
When you're
So,
partnering a project.
excuse me, if I could just finish. The second thing is that us allocating $1 million at this time, when there's uncertainty associated with the potential high cost of Measure J implementation and the potential massive costs to the district, dedicating $1 million that will be unavailable to us in the next couple years at this time, I think is something that that we shouldn't do. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I still stand with my motion to approve.
So we still have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Then I will call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion carries 5-1. I'd like to move on to number 14, General Manager's Report.
Just pass it down. I'm passing around an item that was not really on the agenda, but as you know, the Association of California Water Agencies was here in town for their spring conference, and we were a sponsor, and I just wanted to show that on the back, this vertical with names of sponsors was out in front of the exhibition hall for the entire period, and then what you see on the screen was during the lunch where Wade Crowfoot, the Secretary of Resources for the state, was the keynote speaker, and we were recognized as a sponsor at that time. So I just want to share that with you. And next year we figured out that our branding ad in the weekly should have been something about Aqua being in town, but things come to us slowly sometimes. So item 14 is the status on compliance with the state board order and the adjudication. This chart we're getting used to seeing on a monthly basis. There's two things I want to highlight here. In the coastal sub-area of the Seaside Groundwater Basin, actual exceeded target, and it's always kind of a balancing act, maintaining pressures in basically the hydraulics of the seaside area during the ASR season requires a little more production from the seaside groundwater basin. So that's what was going on there. But if you go all the way to the right-hand column, you can see that as a whole, the actual is 261 acre-feet below the target, which is good. On the water projects and rights, two things I want to point out. The table 13 actual is a nice, robust number, and that just is reflective of how much rain and how much flow in the river there is. This is kind of back calculated, that once you identify where all your water came from, this is an interruptible right with a certain time of year that we call table 13 rights because there's a table 13, in an earlier order by the state. And so CalAm perfected this right back in like 2012 or 13. And so it's, in wet years, it's a productive right. Sand City Desal is still struggling with its discharge permit. The salinity of the inflow affects the salinity of the outflow, and they're outside of their compliance window, so there hasn't been a whole lot of production from the Sand City plant. The next one, which is production for customer service, proxy for demand. basically, we're in pretty good shape. We're 205 acre-feet below this point last year. And May is going to be wetter than last year, so, as we've entered the irrigation season, we might keep that 200, 250 acre-foot buffer over last year. Rainfall, April was just under a half an inch, which brought us down from just over 150% of long-term average to 141%. But as you'll see on the next chart, May is already more than twice its normal, but its normal is just under a half an inch. So we're at 1.1 inches for May already. And so the interesting thing that this allowed, let me touch on unimpaired flow. Just to let you know, we're at 219% of long-term average. So over 134,000 acre-feet of unimpaired flow down the river. So from aquifer storage and recovery, if you did see the weekly or the pine cone, very well placed ads, by the way, reminded people that it was a very productive season, the second best ever for ASR. Of course, we wanted more, but still second best ever. But the message was, don't get too caught up in it until we finalize the water supply getting built. We still need to conserve. So what's interesting here is that little gap towards the end. Basically, we were done. We were under our Highway 1 flow requirement. And then that little bit of rain that came back, so we shut down for 3 days, and it came back. And so our guys have been out there, and they'll probably be able to take it, hopefully, all the way to the end of the month. So we're now at 1,285 acre-feet through yesterday. It was on today, so we'll just keep going. You can see by the height of the yellow bars that we're not getting nearly as much in. So, we're a little more flow constrained at this point. And that concludes the compliance update. Very briefly on item 15.
That's odd.
Did we come unplugged?
Let's see.
Well, you have a copy in your packet. The important things are on Pure Water Monterey. We're looking now at September for water delivered for injection. There we go. There's a nice aerial view of things going on. It's really coming together. So September for injection, beginning of 2020 for water delivered for customer use, and then the potential backup expansion project. CEQA work has begun. The NOP, that notice of preparation, has been issued. There will be a public meeting on June 5th to go over it, scoping meeting, and then it's expected to be certified, the supplemental certified the last week of February. So it's pretty fast pace. On the desal plant, you may recall that the City of Marina and Marina Coast filed their petition for writ of review back in February. There's still been no action from the Supreme Court. April 24th, Monterey County Planning Commission approved the combined permit, which included the grading permit and the use permit. That was appealed by Public Water Now last Thursday. So I think there's a 60-day window that the supervisors would have to act, but that clock just got started. April 30th, the City Council was to consider the appeal of their Planning Commission denial of the coastal development permit. CalAm withdrew, and with strong feelings, they believe they've got the right to appeal directly to the Coastal Commission, which could happen as early as July. And just a reminder that the State Board imposed milestone for the water supply project this year by September 30th. There needs to be the start of construction of any desalination plant feature. And that could be the plant, the intake facilities, the conveyance pipeline, the brine mixing appurtenances, and so forth. That's very likely to happen based on the county's grading permit, but if the appeal were to somehow undo that, then that comes at risk. That's the end of my summary on water supply.
I heard, maybe I read it somewhere, that the project, Pure Water Monterey, 3,500 acre feet, is slightly behind schedule?
Yeah,
And is it, in your schedule here, is it only a month, couple months? Is that the nature of the delay?
yeah, currently, yeah. So originally we expected to begin injection by July 1st, and so now we're into September. So 2.5 months, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, directors? Okay, move on to item 16, our attorney's report.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. The board met tonight in closed session on 2 items: conference with labor negotiators under Government Code 54957.6, and conference with legal counsel regarding pending or threatened litigation, Government Code 54956.9B. As to both items, a status report was provided. The board gave direction, but there was no reportable action taken.
Thank you. 17, oral reports on activity of county, cities, and other agencies. Anybody go to any meetings this month? Oh, my goodness, all of us. All right. Start at the end and work our way down.
Oh, just briefly, I attended the Carmel Valley Association meeting and just gave them a brief update of where things were with Pure Water Monterey, and also just introduced myself and answered questions.
I had the opportunity to attend some of the Aqua meetings while Aqua was meeting here in town. It was very enjoyable, terrific to meet some different people and talk about the shared issues that we all have.
Great.
I attended the special district meeting, our special district meeting last month with the general manager, and what came out of that was LAFCO was having a public hearing on the annexation of parts of Division 1, Fort Ord portion to Marina Coastal. Found out from the city that that was approved, and I know that we got in our goals, the general manager put in our goals about that, and I hope we can get an update on that. So parts of Division 1 on Fort Ord is going to be lost to Marina Coastal, who are giving them services out there, supplying the water. Now we're trying to give the people the right to vote for their directors out there. Next thing that I want to thank staff for the ribbon cutting at Martin Luther King School of Arts. We did a recommendation. We did that project up there that we approved tonight, another one at the International School. That's the same thing that they did at Martin Luther King School of Art. I want to thank Stephanie and Steve Thomas and Kyle Smith for all their good work. Steve Thomas was a good MC at that one. I appreciate him. He really got that program carried on. I want to thank Director Riley for being there, and I also want to thank 2 former board members that sat up here that helped move that project along. Besides these 2, Director Burns and Chairman, our chairperson. I want to thank them. And I want to thank Mary Rubio and Brenda Lewis. They sat on the board too. They got that project moved through. Okay, and my last thing I got to the general manager, I seen your presentation given to Pacific Grove on May 1st. And I just want to know, are those new water numbers, demand numbers that was given out, that was mentioned? So.
For Pacific Grove's local project, there were some new numbers that were a subset of our overall demand. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Director Burns?
I also attended a couple of sessions of the Aqua Conference. It was great.
Yeah, I attended the Aqua Conference too. I was fascinated by the number of times that the emphasis was given from the podium and from various speakers of how the changing climate and the impacts of that are going to be massively complicated. And the urban-rural split, the urban-forest interface presents new kind of challenges. And it seems like the state is very much willing, and we've seen that recently with the SIGMA legislation, willing to give the locals the opportunity to try to solve their problems. And if they don't move according to a schedule that the state establishes, the state will do it for us. I mean, I think they were putting the hammer out there to say, this is a hammer, we got it. We will use it if we have to, but we're giving you a chance to do things. So I just think they were pretty consistent on the significance of changing dynamics, and whatever has been the historical patterns of everything, the new challenges are going to be different. And I had to laugh. I had to laugh at one point because some guy at the end. This is Thursday. This is near the end of the conference. One guy stood up, and after all of the presentations and messages coming from the podium and the groups themselves, one guy stood up and said, "You just don't get it. We need more water." That's the problem. Anyway, I just learned a lot. It's really to be. It was interesting to be around the kind of policy geeks. I thought. Also, the Carmel River Advisory Committee sponsored a trip to the Los Padres Dam. We were on that. Yeah, I was going to piggyback on you, but I'll just we were on that tour. And it was a good tour. It lasted a long time. We were battling the rain that day because it was a thunderstorm. But anyway, it was a good good session. And the last thing is Director Edwards mentioned it, but it's the Martin Luther King School, elementary school. And I just think the school projects are terrific teaching opportunities. And I just hope that more schools kind of get into this and helpful and message their own kids. Because I mean, this is a real world project dealing with a real world issue, and the kids can learn from that. Anyway,
Just follow up. I neglected to say, but thank you, Larry, and the other staff that hosted us and took us up to Los Padres Dam and educated us about the issues in the area and with the dam. Very much appreciated.
I would just like to suggest that Chair Evans give us just 2 words about her recent trip.
Well, that's.
Oh, yes.
It's not even tangentially related to water.
Well, you were swimming in it. I think it's a real plus to have us represented back in Spain.
Well, so briefly, I competed as a member of Team USA, representing our country at the World Multisport Championships in Pontevedra, Spain. I competed in the aquathlon event, which is a swim and run multisport challenge. I was one of about 700 Team USA athletes, and there were about, I think there were somewhere around 3,400 athletes from 58 countries competing. I did not bring home the gold, bronze, or silver, but I did really well for myself in some pretty brutal conditions. So, thank you. Thanks. So, hence I was not at Aqua.
You were in it.
I was in Aqua, yes.
I just have a question. So I do a lot of public speaking, and I often talk about water. I'm there primarily, though, in my capacity as a member of the Board of Supervisors. I don't need to disclose that as far as the AB 1234.
No, you don't. It's AB 1234 is related to compensation.
So, and when we're doing these reports, it's only if a person is paid for it.
Exactly. I mean, typically, if we go to an aqua conference and the board funds are used, then you would need to disclose that at the next regular meeting, so no.
And no board funds were used in my trip, just to be clear. All right. Well, if it were up to me, I would totally skip this next item forever. But I would like to recognize Larry Hampson on his 28 years of service to the district upon his retirement at the end of this month. So, Larry, I don't want you to go, I'll be honest. You have been a great source of information and understanding for me in my time on this board, and I'm sure that my fellow board members have learned so much from you as well. Your knowledge and your passion for what you do, it would get anybody, the way that you show how interested you are and you show your passion would make other people interested in it as well. I love that you show how much you care about the river, what happens on the river, and you go to such great lengths to ensure that we do our job right, everybody on the district, staff, and board members as well. And it just is so touching to me that you care so much, and that's why I don't want you to go. Your knowledge and your passion will be missed greatly, and I want to thank you for all of the time that you've spent here. And I, again, would like you to reconsider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be available for a while after official retirement.
Any of my fellow directors would like to? Jeannie,
Well,
you've been here the longest.
Well, I mean, I think you have pretty much summed it up. I mean, Larry is pretty much indispensable, which is why we're looking forward to him still being here for at least a certain amount of time, even though he's retired.
Jeez, 28 years is a really long time. How are you going to be able to do anything else?
Oh, I'll see what I can see what I can do.
Just thank you so much. You've always been just so incredibly kind and understanding and forgiving when stupid questions are asked of you over and over and over again, primarily from me. And I really I appreciate you very much. And while you may go into another category, I'm delighted that you're going to be around a little bit longer. So thank you again for your service. It's really been just stellar. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, you've never failed in generating a huge historical string of facts when any kind of question comes up. It's the institutional knowledge that I think you're a treasure. The people like you are. You're better than a filing cabinet. That's not necessarily a compliment.
This is encouraging.
But I think it's important for institutional memory to have people like you on board. And I don't know who's next, but anyway, I'm going to miss that. Thank you.
And I'm really going to miss you because I remember you when I came here, you were on the river. And then you moved to the office as the district engineer. And you have a lot of knowledge of what's going on. And my 13 years that I had here before, I knew you was a great help. So I'm glad that we got a replacement that you can train in these few months. So you can move on and ride your bike all day. So you haven't stopped doing that. But I'm going to miss you, Larry. I'm going to really miss you. And I know that you steady on the job because you took those directors out there when it was raining to the dam. And, you know, I was going to go out there, but it was raining. And I sit up there saying, I wonder if they're going to cancel it. And Larry listened to these two gentlemen. You didn't cancel. So you moving on, and I'm going to miss you. So, but you're staying here a little while longer that we're going to approve, I hope. Thank you.
And I just wanted to it was dovetailing on what George said. It was clear on the tour, the level of knowledge and background and your knowledge of the details was impressive to me. And so, going to the institutional knowledge aspect of this, I hope that some of that is metamorphosized in some of the other folks here because it's invaluable, that knowledge. And I hope, that you have some availability for us in the future so that we can still use that wealth of knowledge. So thanks, Larry.
So there is one thing I would like to say back to the board, and that's that the board in 28 years has been steadfast in funding the programs needed to restore the Carmel River, improve the habitat, and obviously in trying to find a replacement water supply. And a lot of agencies would give up after so many decades, but this board has made my job better and my interest in carrying things out much greater, because I've seen things go from concept to finished product and monitor. And as a civil engineer, you really don't get to do that a lot, but this board's held steadfast on doing the right things for the Carmel River and the environment. So that's what I'd like to see back to the board.
Thanks, Larry. Before you sit down, I was going to wait till you hit the chair. So we would like to present you with this. It's a picture of Hatton Ranch from Highway 1 from 1945.
Oh, cool.
And there's a plaque that goes with it. There's a plaque that goes with it, but I told him to hold off in case we could change the retirement date on it. Thank you so much for everything.
This was way before my birthday.
Hey, I won't stand for you.
Thank you. Very much.
Yeah, you can tell the impact Larry's had with the Carmel Valley Association, the Carmel River Advisory Committee, the Carmel, what's your organization? Watershed Conservancy. The people who know the river and know basically your division know Larry and count on Larry and call Larry out. The fact that other members of staff wanted something really special to go on Larry's wall to remember it by, and have worked really hard to recognize his retirement in a fun and festive way. He's a solid friend and colleague and important member of the community.
And so, Larry, if you and if all the directors would stay after, I'd like to do a photo. Thank you. Sorry. Well, we can find another one, I'm sure.
You don't want that one.
I wasn't sure what that was all about.
We'll move on to our action items for the night. Number 19, consider approval of 1- and 3-year strategic planning goals.
I'll be brief because I think the staff note's pretty explanatory. There are proposed 7 one-year goals and 5 3-year goals. This process came out of the process we've been using now for the last 6-7 years. It may change. I think I'm hearing that it will change going forward with a little more of a chance to get away off-site and tell each other what you really think. But this one evolved from a bunch of individual meetings with each director and then trying to find overlap and similarities and then organizing them in a certain way. So for the proposal for 1-year goals is to continue to advance water supply projects. Each of these has a series of bullets or sub-goals. The second is to complete Measure J and the Rule 19.8 feasibility analysis. Number 3 is to continue to raise profile of the district at the local, regional, state, and federal level. Number 4 is to establish clear requirements for water distribution systems within the district. That's not just California American Water, but consistently we need to kind of pull out some of the requirements we put on them and make sure that they're actually being followed. Number 5 is develop a comprehensive strategy for permit 2808B, which is the remainder permit. We use A and C for our aquifer storage and recovery. Number 6 is fiscal sustainability and long-term financial planning. Both, it was mentioned, Measure J could be very costly. We've got some PERS and OPEB liabilities, and we've got a water supply charge funding change that we need to look at. And then lastly, organizational issues, which covers a gamut of things. One is to more cohesively develop a sustainability policy to spring on some of the actions that we've been taking. You've heard discussion about how big our packets are and whether we can go electronic, but also things like the LEDs that Suresh has gotten and the electric vehicles that we've gotten. So we'll try to bring that all together a little bit. Of the 3-year goals, the first, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of questions, but under the develop a comprehensive strategy for current tool 808B, identifying 2 or 3 potential injection and recovery sites, both in the Seaside Basin and Corona Valley. Can you tell me where those would be, particularly in the Corona Valley, and about how much infrastructure and cost would be involved?
Right. So the other potential areas, the Tuller-Cetus Creek area, there's an alluvial, small but alluvial basin, and one of the ideas is you could inject there, recover, potentially just use the creek as your delivery mechanism. But a lot of this all spins off of when does desal come online, how much more capacity do we need, can we identify it as future potential capacity, and will that be sufficient for the state to leave the water right with us? So just identifying the potential sites is part of it, just so that the state won't revoke the remainder. Some of the other strategies that we're looking at, it's not just injection, but it's can you make the water usable if it can be wheeled to some other entity that's looking for water. But it's not a sure thing that a revocation hearing would be held, but 2020 is the date that they could. And so it's in our interest to develop some potential uses, whether we intend to fully follow through on developing them or not.
And then would you say that developing the strategy for direct diversion component of the water right is probably the most important element that we have here?
Well, yes and no. It's a small piece of the right, and it's going to be time limited probably, but it's been an overlooked portion of the right, and so just thinking about it in retrospect, I don't think we talked about it much when the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project was being put together as a package. And that right's a junior right, if you will, as well. So the direct diversion component may or may not have any value, but we need to at least think about it. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
The way I look at this is to what's achievable in a year, and what are the measurable outcomes that can be identified. And so I guess my question is, it appears that in a lot of these situations, well, I shouldn't say a lot, in some of these situations, it looks as if these aren't necessarily things that could reasonably be achieved in the 1-year time frame. So has a critical look been taken to see reasonably if these can be done in a year's time?
Yeah, so many of them are established the plan, and the components of the plan are going to take longer than a year. For example, like the 808 water right. And even some of the simple things like under fiscal sustainability. We usually do pretty well at 80 to 90% of the 1-year bullets. There's been an occasional 1 year that just blew itself up, and you knew from the first month in it was no longer going to be a 1-year goal. But that's why the attachment on the previous set of goals was included, as with kind of showing you progress. And this one's pretty good on progress, and the last 2-year cycle was even better in progress, and the last 2-year cycle before that was even better in progress. So I think in general, there's a lot here, and there are things that are not going to get done. But we do pretty well at getting a lot of it, most of it done. But we need at least that, put it on paper as guidance. But I think it's unrealistic to have 7 1-year goals with anywhere from 6 to 10 sub-bullets. But these areas all need to be addressed in the near term. There are near-term things in each area that needs work, so.
Yeah, to join in on that, I don't see these as being completable in a year, but I think they need to be acted on in some fashion in a year. Like they could be longer term 3-year goals, but I don't want to wait until the 3rd year to start these.
And
I'd
that's
rather
also
have
why
them up
we went
forefront
to
of the
this
mind.
1 year and 3 year, because we knew that some 1 year is gonna roll into the 2nd year, and you can kind of track it. And then we've got something on the 3 year that's been on the 3 year twice already, due in no small part to the water supply project not moving forward. So that's why the cycles work for us, but yeah, it's unrealistic.
Because part of this is additional suggestions for the 1-year goals. And one thing at the administrative committee, one thing that was on the consent calendar was the updating the CIMIS system, so that, and the CIMIS system basically generates evapotranspiration data and sends it to DWR, and so it's available to folks to modify or modulate their irrigation practices for conservation purposes. And so it occurred to me that as a 1-year goal, it would be valuable to establish a working group that develops conservation strategies for non-CalAm riparian pumpers in the Carmel River watershed. And just, pie in the sky kind of stuff. And this would be something the working group of stakeholders could look at. It's just, it seems to me that trying to integrate the CIMIS system to enable those folks, because it's not just the CalAm pumping that puts the watershed at risk. It's also the non-CalAm pumpers that have an effect. And if we could just overall,
Yeah.
And the other thing that occurred to me is that I don't know when the last strategic review of the water conservation program and rebate program has been done, but it seems to me that it might be a good idea as a 1-year goal to establish a working group to assess the effectiveness of each of the programs, and then recommend possible enhancements, and bring in stakeholders, and just actually I think that a periodic review of existing programs is a good thing. That and as you pointed out, Chair Evans, it may not be something that's accomplished completely in the 1st year, but to get the ball rolling on these things, it seems to me that those are a couple of additions that I would suggest be added to the 1 year.
Well, I do believe that we do get a staff report on the conservation and rebate program and how much has been saved throughout the time period. It's in the back.
Yeah,
Right.
but
And
things like,
so-
so the Water Demand Committee has periodically said, hey, what should be our primary focus? And so when rebates for turf were eating up a lot of money, but not necessarily providing the best bang for the buck, the committee did ask, maybe we should reprioritize. So that's when the high-efficiency clothes washers got more and turf got less. And so re-looking at those periodically is a good idea.
And just from the standpoint of, and again, this goes back to my concern that some of the disadvantaged households need to be given more incentive to switch over to high-efficiency washers, dryers, dishwashers, and such. And so looking at ways to refocus or to focus more to get those types of washers and so forth into their hands, brainstorming to come up. We had the HEART program, which we got a presentation on it at the last meeting, and they had some success, but I thought that the level of participation could have been a lot better. And so that's why I bring it up. It's just, let's take a look at, and also the amount of the rebates. I mean, over time, you've got inflation and with the tariffs now on washing machines, prices are going up, and so maybe we need to take a look at how much of those rebates should be. So that's the kind of thing that I'm kind of talking about getting a group together to kind of brainstorm about just how to, make things a little bit better.
Okay, would you?
Wouldn't that fit into the water demand committee that we already have a group that's kind of focused on that?
Okay, well, we can save that for the discussion portion.
So that's the two additional ideas that I had for the one-year goals.
Okay.
Got him.
If I can, add, I mean, I'm just asking about process, because I have some comments, but I don't know if I'm adding anything or adding up
Well,
here,
I
adding
feel
up the paper, and that's kind of what.
I realize that I should have asked for some of this to wait until the discussion portion. So right now it's questions for staff.
Okay.
So I did
okay, thank you.
drop the ball on that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's okay. We'll move on to 3-year goals.
As I mentioned, there's 5 3-year goals. Simply a measure J, rule 19.8, next steps follow-up. If the consultant's work points in the direction of it is feasible, then we need to prep ourselves for the bench trial. If it proves infeasible, then we just need to call it a day and look at rebuilding the monies that were spent and what is our next step, and certain decisions about what the plain language of the initiative actually means. Says if and when feasible, we'll have to decide, are we coming back in another period of time under if. So we'll have some direction one way or the other. The second is a long-term strategy for Los Padres Dam. We have been keeping Water Supply Committee pretty much up to date on this is why Larry retired, actually, because mission creep on the Los Padres Dam alternative study and the changing role of the regulators, the filing for the company's next general rate case, just the preliminary filing just went in. We need to kind of look at how they addressed the demands that are being put on the company, who we've partnered with. We've been managing the project, but we just need to see what can be funded, what can't be funded off the wish list that keeps growing from National Marine Fisheries Service. Prepare for allocation of new water. This is the one that's moved from 2 years ago, 2 years before that, waiting for there to actually be a shovel in the ground to move earth, to turn earth, that we have a project. That'll give us a 20 to 26 month window to work on allocation of water with the jurisdictions. Continue to examine revising or streamlining rules and regulations. Certain things that seem like easy ideas have old CEQA findings that can't be unfound, but there are some things that we'd like to make easier for the customers. And then the Carmel River Mitigation Program with not just because of new water supply, due to a variety of reasons, but we need to do better monitoring. We need to develop a plan for transitioning the river from a overdrafted river to a replacement supply, and what should the mitigation program look like, and what does that mean for the district in terms of potential savings and people and so forth. So it's time to start that process. And that covers it. I'm here for questions and trying to scribe anything that you come up with as additions or deletions.
Okay. So are there any questions on the 3-year goals?
Comments?
Just, Dave, on number 8.
Yep.
Leave it at questions.
I would just suggest that the second paragraph be revised. I mean, it says paren C and so on.
Yeah.
I think that probably it would be better to either leave that out or actually describe in detail what so on means.
Any other questions? Okay.
So among others or et cetera also. Yeah, okay.
All right, so I'd like to open this item up for public comment.
Dan Turner, Monterey. 3 questions that don't have to be answered now if you don't know the off the top of your head. It was something that Director Hoffman mentioned, Carmel Valley, non-Cal-Am wells. Is there a registry of all the wells in Carmel Valley, or is that unknown? Second, does everybody who has a well on a piece of land out in Carmel Valley own the property, or is the property owned by Mr. A, but the well is owned by Mr. B? And I suppose most important of all, does anyone have any idea how much water non-Cal-Am pumpers are pumping out of Carmel Valley every year?
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Anybody else wishing to comment on this item?
I don't have the report in front of me, but as a member of the Ordinance 152 Oversight Committee, I know that we often talk about making sure that that ultimately goes away. So hopefully you're studying how we're going to make sure that goes away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion. Do you have a comment?
Well, I was more concerned about how does a new board member, speaking as one, get some of the conceptual ideas into discussion and not necessarily knowing how the steps might get applied, or even if the rest of the board members might even disagree with it. But how do you get a dialogue going? That's what I'm looking at. I know I had a dialogue with Dave, and that was good. But there's some words that I have in my mind, or some concepts I have in my mind that I don't know how. And let me just say a few things. I think leadership is an issue that I think the district ought to be thinking not so much about just improving its or raise its profile. It's raising its leadership promotion. And so I don't know how that might look, but in some ways I think we ought to have discussions on regional thinking, regional cooperation, regional partnerships, regional, so that we share resources and share not just the staff and budget resources, but the natural resources. But I just want to have a little discussion more about what that means, not just what it says here. That's all. And I don't know if there's going to be this kind of discussion. Sustainability, I see that here, and I think it goes back to the rebate question too. I think there's some questions that could be raised about how to promote just that as a policy issue, and that's there too. I'd like to, anyway, maybe that's all that I'm trying to think of. I mean, all I want to say, because I don't have it structured in what I want to see as an action plan, but my mind tells me I want to see how the district can provide more leadership. And maybe it's all in here, but I would like to have it around the discussion leadership, not a discussion of reporting requirements or investigations. I want it about leadership. And regional discussions. And transparency is another question, because transparency comes up with the feasibility study, but there's so many other ways that transparency can be promoted. And I would just think that there are ways that this body could sponsor just some regional dialogues or community dialogues. It's another way of just presenting dialogue with the community, hearing from the community, interacting with the community and so on. It's not like you're trying to make a decision, but you're just trying to sort out thinking and find out allies on certain kinds of things and where the district might find room to move forward. Anyway, that's all. It's just busy talking right now.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I do recognize that, and you do raise some good points. But and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but these are our goals. This is not an action plan, right? This is something that we what we do over the next year, 2 years, 3 years is going to, bring these goals to fruition, right? And so your concept of leadership on a regional basis is captured in here. And the other one that you mentioned, transparency is captured in. There is under organizational issues, obtain the CSDA transparency certificate. That, I mean, so it's been picked up in a few places, but I mean, it's not an action plan. It is, but it is in there as what guides our strategy for the year. That's how I think about it. But I don't know that's the only one, if I'm the only one on this board that feels that way.
No, I
don't
think a lot of this will get sorted out in the individual committees that address what the action is, as Molly said, what the action is to accomplish these goals. And I think those will show up with the individual committees, which is why I was saying water demand focuses on one thing, water supply is focusing on some of this, public outreach focuses on some of it. So I think those will come up and have an actual action plan that goes with it.
And that may be the thinking that I didn't go to the committee structure on how to follow up on this, and that maybe that's where it is.
Well, and I think any board member can suggest items that they want those committees to address.
That was just what I was going to bring up, is that if you're not on, I don't believe you're on water demand.
No.
Okay, so if you have an item that should be addressed in water demand, you can always bring it up. It can be put on the agenda, and it can be discussed. That's always within the director's rights to do. And you can attend the meeting. You just can't participate. You can attend.
One of the other things I'd just like to remind you that we're always, as staff, ready to help you if you want to do outreach on your own. So neighborhood meetings, reports to city council, reports to different committees, and you want to know what the current info is or get some materials prepared. I know we've done that with you, a number of you. That's one of the most powerful tools, is being seen out in your division or out in your community, like going to the meeting that you went to and so forth. So never hesitate to ask if you want some material.
So maybe I was on a different track as I was listening to you, though. When I think about leadership, I think about, especially your comment about the regional point. I feel like this at the Board of Supervisors as well, that we're somehow hamstrung by the Brown Act that keeps us from having like a real sort of discussion. But it sounds as if, when I think about leadership, I think about the opportunity that we have, not just going to speak to other organizations, but to have the chance to have some sort of a workshop where we as board members could exchange ideas and have more of a just input into what we think we should be looking at. This is terrific to have the goals. I think it's all wonderful. We all had an opportunity to meet with Dave and talk about what it is that we think is important, and I'm very delighted to see the things that I had talked about and thought about reflected in the goals, both for the 1 year and the 3 year. But I think more than that, I would value the opportunity for us as a group to have the opportunity to think about and talk about in a different sort of setting what some of the regional goals are, some of the different thoughts that we have about where we might be going or where we should be going, that is beyond what we could do in committee work. It would be a more, just a more, I think, it would be more a, 10,000-foot thing, like a plane, where we're just thinking out loud.
All right.
But, but at any rate, and I know that's a challenge, without question. As I said, we see it at the board level as well. But I wish that we had the opportunity to do more of that. I think that would bring cohesion among us as a board that I think could be very helpful for the future of the district, quite frankly.
Yeah, Mary, you just took the words right out of my mouth, because strategic planning, to me, dovetails with, and it's a companion thing to the budgeting process, and that what you set up as your strategic goals should be, and it's certainly in the 1 year, should be reflected to a certain extent in your budget. So, yeah, actually, it was my thought that I know that you've requested that we do a budget workshop, and I think that's excellent. I was going to tonight suggest that we do, before that, in the next week or so, schedule a workshop for us on the 1 year and 3 year strategic plan, so that we can have that back and forth, so we can then also prioritize the different goals, what we think is most important, less important. So that would give staff direction as to where they should focus their energy. So I'm advocating that we have a workshop actually in the next week or so before the budget workshop, so that we have that ability to bounce ideas off the walls, because I am very much interested to hear what all of you have, your ideas about where you think the district should be going or not going in in the 1 and 3 year timeframes.
Through the chair. And actually, I think these goals actually do reflect the individual conversations we've had with staff, and I think it's a pretty good summary of what everybody feels is important. If we had a workshop, it would probably be rehashing the same things and say, do you want to score them 1 through 10, or how do you want to do that? But I do think this represents everybody's input. So a workshop could generate certainly more discussion on each one of these items. But I don't know if it's going to resolve a scoring card, what is the most important, because each one of us have sort of given Dave our top priorities.
A little more, thank you. It's a little bit of a mix between who's been here a number of years and with the experience of the committee structure and what matters are fall into different committees. And people new who aren't so tuned into the committee structure, and we just have these crazy ideas. So having some kind of understanding, I think it goes back to the budget question too. I'm not looking for an all-day workshop. I'm food and all that kind of stuff. I'm not our facilitator, is what I meant to say.
You were thinking food.
You haven't had dinner yet, right?
You want another cookie?
But it's a little bit about merging what you know that we don't know, and what I'm thinking that you don't know either.
Right.
And so how can we have a little bit of dialogue? And an hour, 2 hours is, I think, about all I'm kind of looking for. I don't know the idea about having a budget discussion. Can they be merged? I mean, can we have a 2 or 2.5 hour thing and just an hour and something on one, an hour and something on the other? And does that help? I mean, it would help me. I just think it was
Right. Yeah. To your question, we can. I would consider holding a workshop on the strategic planning. My fear is that it's going to degrade into a more detailed session. Like, I see us at the 10,000 foot level here, and we've hit on some overall strategies and some bullet points underneath. I don't want to get into the thing on how we do each one of these over the year. And that's what I fear that this might turn into if we have more of a discussion amongst us, to get down. It feels like we're just going to drill it further down instead of saying on a higher, more overall level.
10,000 to 5,000 feet and then stop. And maybe that's the challenge of the chair, to keep us in line. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
Yeah, but I think from strategic planning perspective, the new board was seated in December, and we tried to time it so that if there are budgeting implications, we'd be able to get it into the preliminary budget. We're kind of past that at this point, unfortunately, because I do hear, given the personalities on the board, a desire to have an afternoon retreat, an off-site, where you can talk through strategic goals and vision and leadership and things like that. It's too late to inform this process at this time, but I think we should, if that's the desire of the board, we need to start doing that. Same thing on budget. The previous board said, I've only got so many meetings I want to go to. Let's do our budget workshop in the context of discussion at a board meeting. But you want to move to a budget workshop, we're fine with that. We'll support whatever it is you want. I'm just saying, timing-wise on the strategic goals, it's probably has passed, but maybe a late summer leadership summit on where you want the district to go, something like that would be comfortable. We can talk through what it is you want. Certainly, the next go-round for strategic planning purposes, goal setting, if it's a different format, we'll do it. But I don't think we can wedge it in between now and adoption of the budget and actually inform the budget.
Just wanted to say that's exactly what I was gonna say, that the ship has left the port.
Yeah.
You know, the budget is probably ready, we've already had our opportunity for input. This, I view, as much more a long-range opportunity, where, and I think your timing is apt, that we would do this, if we choose to do this, that we would do it sometime at the end of the summer, when we have an opportunity, the new budget will already be established. We can look now then toward the next 3 years or next 2 years, however it is that you want to do. But I really thank you very much for appreciating what I think there is a feeling among the board members to have some sort of an offsite with that opportunity of just sort of brainstorming together.
Yeah. There would be
It's
food.
county council's responsibility to figure out how we can do it without violating the Brown Act.
We make it public and then
Yeah.
discourage the public.
No, we don't discourage the public.
Secret location.
No.
So,
Thank you.
Just my last comment is, I don't see it, it's not an urgent issue with me. It's just sometime in the near future, I would like to have and hear, other people's reactions to what, rises to the top in their thinking.
Fair enough, I think that's worth
We might
pursuing.
use
This is
this
an
as a
action
basis
item.
to
We need a
start.
motion.
This is an action item, yes, we
I'd
do need a
move
motion.
to approve the presented goals.
I'll second that.
And we'll have some further discussion.
Yeah, I had suggested a couple of things, so I don't know from a procedural perspective whether or not we need to address those or not.
Either offer an
I would like
amendment
to
the
see
motion.
those roll into our workshop, maybe in a couple of months or end of summer, whatever.
Well, I
works for
think the
staff.
conservation-related ones, we will roll into Water Demand Committee anyway, because we need to look and see what the funding levels are in the general rate case and see if that may motivate us to raise our funding for things or not.
I think some
the
of it will
DAC
sort out in the
incentives.
committees,
Yeah.
some of your suggestions.
But the CIMUS idea is actually a very interesting one, and also trying to tie it in with not necessarily CIMUS data, but just the smart controllers now that are tapping into soil moisture and weather data. There's other sources that you can kind of bring it all together. So I'm not sure it needs to be an identified goal, but those two are on the list now for things to look at.
And I believe there something in the strategic goals already addressing non-Cal-Am pumpers?
Well, yeah,
To some
in
extent
the
on
answer to the
something, I
speaker's
remember it was in
question,
there.
non-Cal-Am pumping, we use a number of 3,046 acre-feet per year.
Well, that wasn't what I was asking, but go on.
And we do have
I'll find it.
well identification and well reporting for, we're over 90% now, aren't we?
Probably 99%
Yeah.
of wells in Climate Valley are metered and reported.
Right. And there are a few water distribution systems that may be on one individual's property and serving other parcels, but they're all, permitted under a water distribution system permit. But as far as the non-Cal-Am pumpers go, we have, as part of the mitigation program, that's one of the things that we'll have to look at, which is if Cal-Am heads to this operating regime where there's very little production during the summer, and the non-Cal-Am pumpers are now the influencer of the river during that period, what does that mean? And so we will be looking at that from the environmental resource perspective. But then there are also things, we're about to do an annual adoption of Table 16, or 15. And we need to go back and look at that number that I just gave you. How relevant is that? That's the number we've been carrying for non-Cal-Am pumpers for quite some time. And we know non-Cal-Am pumping's up. There's been increases in grapes that are planted. There's increases in some diversions for golf course irrigation. Then there's been decreases with Rancho Cañada being gone. And so I think we need to hone our whole understanding of the non-Cal-Am pumpers. Same thing with Seaside Basin. We've got some historical things that are in there that we need to revisit. data-wise, but.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, call the question. We have a motion from Director Byrne and a second from Director Riley. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries 6-0. So we will move on to number 20, consider adoption of resolution number 2019-05, authorizing an exception to the CalPERS 180-day wait period for hiring a retiree.
Thank you, Chair.
And just clarification, this is marked consent in the packet, but it's correct on the agenda. It is an action item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So this item is before you, and the official retirement date for Larry is May 31st, and we'd like to keep Larry on board after that day for at least a period of 1 year. But in order to do that, we have to go through a 180-day waiting period with CalPERS. But since Larry is the expertise and the district engineer for the district itself, there is a provision in the CalPERS laws where we basically can waive the 180-day period. In order to waive it, the board has to adopt a resolution in open session, and the resolution is attached to this particular staff note. So that would basically give us the ability of bringing Larry back effective immediately as soon as he retires. So his retiree date is May 31st. I think we are planning on bringing him back June 1st with the new contract in place. So the contract would be for 1 year. And the caveat to that is that it cannot exceed 960 hours in a fiscal year. So we would make sure that we would track that, and from July 1 through May 31st, that it will not exceed 960 hours. He will be paid at the same rate as he was paid while he was employed as the district engineer.
Did he just say?
There is another piece of paper that I passed around, and basically that we forgot to attach that to the staff note. That should have been attached to the resolution, and that is the simple one-page employment contract with Larry.
Suresh just got pointed out that the letter says 900 hours, the staff note says 960.
Oh, okay, we'll make the correction. Should be 960 hours.
It's not our intent to necessarily use all of these hours, by the way. My goal would be to transition him. He's got a bunch of projects where he's a key man and key knowledge. But I think we're talking probably not more than 2 days a week to continue to both help colleagues transition into the work that he had been doing, as well as to manage a couple of projects. But we are not in agreement that it's going to be a full year. It may be less, depending. And yeah, we've had that conversation. So.
Okay, do any of the directors have questions?
If you can keep them for a full year, go ahead to the new one, transition in. I don't want to scare them away now.
So I will open this up to comments from the public. Anyone wishing to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board.
Pretty short retirement, Larry.
Yeah.
He will.
I thought you were going to England.
Yeah, he'll actually be away for several weeks, so it's not like.
Well done.
Adoption of the resolution.
Second. Okay, we have a motion from Director Riley and a second from Director Adams. Is there any further discussion from the board? Okay. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. So we'll move on to the public hearings. Consider number 21. Consider adoption of a negative declaration and the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 181, amending district rules and regulations to modify the extent of the Carmel River riparian corridor. Take it away, Larry.
So, yes, this is item 21. Because the board has already seen this, this will be the third time. I'll do a short presentation, be happy to answer questions after the presentation. So, let's see. Dave's up there. So, first of all, we have a proposed negative declaration for the project, which is to extend the district's Carmel River riparian corridor from approximately Carmel Valley Village up to the Ventana Wilderness. The board was provided that proposed negative declaration at the February board meeting. District did post the notice of intent to adopt the negative declaration and initial study, and we posted that with the State Clearinghouse. We did get comments from Caltrans, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Native American Heritage Commission. Essentially, the Caltrans comments were any projects within the Caltrans right-of-way must be done according to Caltrans standards. I believe the only right-of-way Caltrans has is right at Highway 1. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife had extensive comments, but most of the comments were to recommend specific mitigation measures for projects along the Carmel River. For instance, making sure that if you have to divert water, that there are certain mitigation measures for diverting water included in the negative declaration. Council and I agreed that that type of detailed mitigation wasn't really appropriate for this action. What this action is it allows the district to take another action to actually write up specific river work permits with specific mitigation measures. It allows the district to look at specific impacts from specific projects. And it's during that phase of the process that it's really more appropriate to include all the mitigation measures that the Department of Fish and Wildlife was recommending. I did send the comment letter, our comments back to Fish and Wildlife, and I basically suggested that a lot of these things could be worked out with the existing memorandum of agreement that the district has with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We could include in our memorandum of agreement that when we issue river work permits, for instance, we would notify the California Department of Fish and Wildlife that we're going to issue a river work permit. So we could address their comments through that process, which seems much more appropriate than what they had recommended that we do with this negative declaration. And then the Native American Heritage Commission had a pretty extensive letter, but it basically quoted the laws that we have to follow in order to issue river work permits, and had a lot of language about reaching out and consulting with Native Americans. So the district received a letter from the Ohlone Coastal Ohlone Esalen Indian Nation, the OCEN, I think it was in 2015, saying any projects that the district approve, they want to be notified and have an ability to respond to those projects. We sent the letter to them saying we wanted to adopt this mitigated negative declaration and extend the zone. We did not receive any comments from any Native Americans, and we received no request for consultation over this item. So the district satisfied its requirements in that respect. And let's see if I can do this very lightly. So under the California Environmental Quality Act, the board has to consider the entire CEQA record to take this action. And in making your determination about this project, you can rely on the Carmel River Management Program Environmental Impact Report, which was adopted in 1984, which actually set up the original Carmel River Management Program and riparian corridor. And then also the mitigated negative declaration that was in your packet, as well as the written comments and responses. And then if there are any comments at this meeting, you should respond to those comments and give staff direction in order to complete the record.
Larry, if I could ask a question just on. So in your view, is the existing 1984 EIR still valid, or are there other things in the subsequent 30 years that with climate change and environmental conditions on the river maybe being a little different, that it's still a valid document?
Well, so there have been two, I guess, legal actions, the listing of steelhead, the listing of California red-legged frogs, that prompted the board in 1997 to add mitigation measures concerning California red-legged frogs. And the reason the board didn't take specific action regarding steelhead is that a primary goal of the Carmel River Management Program was restoration of steelhead. And so at the time that steelhead were listed, it didn't appear there was a need to change the document to recognize listing of the steelhead because the mitigation measures for steelhead were included at the programmatic level. And so there's a distinction between a programmatic EIR and a project-specific EIR. And that was a programmatic EIR in which you've got this basic program, you've got a Carmel River Management Program, and at the time you have specific projects, you then amend that program EIR, which the district has done for each of the projects that were approved. And so it's still appropriate to use the programmatic EIR to have a program to regulate activities along the Carmel River. And so there's no, this is merely an extension of that program, and the program remains the same as it was adopted in 1984, with the amendments that have been done since then. So the ordinance itself, if you adopt this, was presented in February, but it didn't have all of the changes in strikeout and markup. And so you received another copy of the revised draft ordinance in April that contained both the proposed additions and the deletions to the district rules. No oral comments have been received at either of the February or April meetings about that ordinance. The only change from the April version to the May version is to add language that says the district would publish the river work permits in whatever fashion the district can. For instance, at this point, we could publish river work permits on the web page. Should that change, we could change the way that the river work permits are published. And so the recommendations are to respond to any written or oral comments during the public hearing and then close the public hearing, approve the draft mitigated negative declaration, direct staff to prepare the final mitigated negative declaration, which would include any of the comments received and the responses by the district, adopt the ordinance 181, and then direct staff to post the notice of determination. And of course, that would include paying Monterey County fees to do that.
Larry, on the
So
responses from the, I'm sorry, from Fish and Wildlife, as I understand it, it's that any substantive comments need to be addressed. Have you reconciled with Fish and Wildlife their concerns so that there's not going to be a bottom of the ninth inning thing that they throw at us to try to derail this? So
in your packet, beginning on page 157, is a copy of the Department of Fish and Wildlife letter. And it has numbers associated with their comments. And there is also the district's letter responding back that describes specifically each of the numbered comments have a response from the district. I sent that letter back to Fish and Wildlife I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think the date's on the letter itself. And I sent that through email and paper, and I encouraged the CDFW person to call me or email me with questions. I received no response, and to my knowledge, the district's received no written response regarding our response letter.
So we're in the clear, basically. So they basically, their time is run out on disputing or contesting the final mitigating negative declaration?
No. Once if this is approved, we post the notice of determination. CDFW will have 30 days to file a lawsuit over the action. I would hope that they would call first so that we could resolve any issues.
Sorry, Chair.
Thanks. Do any other directors have questions?
Thank you, Chair Evans. I see a cost estimate of $2,400. Is that the Monterey County fees?
That's 23. I think it's 20. Actually, it's $2,325 to California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's $50 to the county.
Oh, why are they paying the state so much?
That's a fee that's set each year by the legislature for these kinds of actions.
Okay.
So, as a side note, and here's where the history goes. The district filed a notice of determination on the original 1984 Carmel River Management Program EIR. Subsequent actions don't require that you pay fees, but you have to have a receipt. You got to have a check or a receipt that you paid. So 1984, I don't have a copy of a receipt from 1984, so we have to pay the fees.
Okay. Thank you, Larry, for the history.
Before you go,
Yes.
just to follow up on Director Hoffman's question, and you said that they have 30 days to file a lawsuit. They would have 30 days to file regardless, right? Or is it not just, is it because they just haven't responded back to your response?
Well, if you post the notice of determination, it shortens the period of appeal from, I think it's 180 days to 30 days. So
Okay.
if you don't file a notice of determination, they can take up to 180 days to
Okay.
appeal.
And that's not just them, it's anybody.
Correct. Got it.
Thank you. So I'll open this up to public comment. Anybody, any member of the public wishing to speak? Okay, we'll close comment, bring it back to the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the second reading and adopt ordinance number 181 to extend the Carmel River riparian corridor by 13.5 miles from the eastern end of Carmel Valley Village upstream to the Ventana Wilderness boundary, and to adopt the mitigated negative declaration and file a notice of determination.
Second.
Yeah, I'm not repeating that. All right, we have a motion from Director Adams and a second from Director Byrne. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I believe this is a roll call vote.
Director Edwards,
Yes?
Director Hoffman,
Yes.
Director Riley. Yes. Director Adams,
Yes.
Director Byrne,
Yes.
Director Evans,
Yes.
unanimous approval.
Way to send Larry out with a bang. All right.
Institutional knowledge comes in. You see, that's what we're talking about.
Item number 22, consider second reading and adoption of ordinance 182, amending rules, blah, 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 blah.
A lengthy list of rules,
You know,
yes.
in order to save us time tonight, so
Yeah.
sum it up that way.
Are we not going? Ah, there we go. Okay. Well, I'm going to exceed Larry's record so, to keep this short. This is ordinance number 182, second reading. This ordinance refines certain procedures necessary to process, issue, and enforce the requirements related to water permits, water distribution system permits, water use permits, water efficiency requirements, rebates, and ex parte communications. This ordinance fixes problem areas that we've identified over the past several years that are related to our normal business processes and to clarify areas that we get frequent questions from the public. The detail is provided in your board packet. There are bullet points that summarize each of the actions in the ordinance, and we went over this list extensively at our last board meeting and first reading. So this evening, the recommendation is that the board receive public comment and then approve the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 182. It is exempt from the CEQA process, and it would become effective 30 days after second reading. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Do any of the directors have questions? Okay. When you're ready.
Thank you for the presentation. And I was looking at section 13, which are the amendments to Rule 33, the jurisdictional and reserve water allocations.
What page?
I'm sorry, page 229.
Yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to know is, as I look at this, it seems as if we need to have some sort of criteria or prioritization that goes with this. And I'm thinking that we should be able to look at ADUs and workforce housing, affordable housing, as far as looking at the reserve allocations. What worries me is it indicates that the district reserve allocation shall refer to a quantity of water available for use at the district's discretion. And that's where I feel we need to have some
It's the
sort of agreed
board's
upon.
discretion.
At the board's discretion, right. And I feel that we need to have some sort of series of priorities or, an agreement of what the criteria would be. If we're going to be augmenting dedications of water from a water entitlement, water use credit, or a new source of supply, that, I would hate to see somebody deciding that they're gonna give, a bunch of water to some mega mansion, when in fact we need water, as the cities and jurisdictions all do, for accessory dwelling units and workforce or affordable housing. So I didn't know what we could do to look at this point, but I feel very strongly that we should have some sort of criteria that we all would agree to as we move forward with this.
I agree with you. What we're doing at this time is just putting back in the definition of the district reserve allocation. There is currently, the only water that is potentially in that allocation is the water from the Pacific Grove small water project. And the board would have the discretion to determine where any water that was in the district reserve allocation is to be used. In the past, everything came before the board of directors. We restricted it to projects that had community benefit. But you will have the ability to decide how that water is going to be used.
And this language reflects board direction to us probably 7 or 8 months ago, when we said, we actually use the word projects with community benefit, and the board said just make it the board's discretion. But I think as this reserve fills up, you're going to want to establish your own priorities. I would caution the board about looking too much like a land use agency and stick as a water agency, but having priorities is a good idea. We don't need to do it here yet.
No, but your comment about public benefit or community benefit, some term like that, I think.
Yeah.
I think that was
Take
our
care of it.
direction, was community benefit, because that community benefit may change different years. One year it might be low-income housing, one year it might be in addition to the hospital. I mean, so we can't be specific, but would be community benefit.
But the challenge to you is perhaps articulating some policy, because otherwise you're going to see them as they arise in kind of a one-off basis. And I can tell you that some community's going to tell you that their allocation for 2 new restaurants is a downtown revitalization public benefit. So picking categories of where you might want to go is something that we can
Well, we can
work
bring
with
this
you.
back through our Water Demand Committee, and then with a recommendation to the board, and the board can have a discussion about it in the future. So that,
But just to clarify, like PG, you read in the paper about 11 point some acre feet of water. Is that for that community only?
Yes.
Okay,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
But part of the deal we cut on that one, which we probably should have done with Malpaso, but that's left the station.
It's water under the bridge.
There's water under the bridge. And we've been pretty clear on this, is we retired a certain amount of water directly to the river. So there was an ecological benefit. That was about 15%. And then we took 10% of the savings and we declared that to be the district's, a contribution to the district reserve. So what this is doing is just recreating the district reserve so there's a place for that to go. It won't come out until you have a chance to determine what the rules will be for it to be allocated. And then the remainder is what was allocated to the city for their use, and a portion of that needs to be held back because it relates to the unlawful diversions off the river, and a portion of it can be made available. And then a portion of it got a haircut because they're not completely off their potable supply at the golf course.
Okay, just clarify one
But
more thing.
PG only.
Oh, just PG only. So the district reserve
Could go anywhere.
can go anywhere.
Yeah.
We gonna have a problem with the state with that one?
We have many problems with the state, Director. But the nice piece of this is what the state has done for Pacific Grove is they identified how they would enforce, if they could enforce. So it's almost a walking backwards into saying, here's what you can do and here's what you can't do. So we'll be in a position with both of those allocations, the city's own and our district reserve, of being able to do some things but not others. The least of which is you won't be able to get a meter set like you can for Malpaso or Sand City entitlements. So.
Okay, thank you.
So is this here in this ordinance, is this establishing a definition of the district reserve, reestablishing the reserve, or is it now talking about the reserve?
no, it's actually doing two things. One is it is creating the location for the water that would be in the district reserve. So the Pacific Grove entitlement water that the district has claim to will be located in the district reserve allocation. The definition for the district reserve allocation is also part of Rule 11, and that's in this ordinance as well, just defining what it is.
Okay, if we're reestablishing it here, where did the water the portion from the Malpaso entitlement go?
There
we
w-
never
There
got
was
that.
none.
That's-
It wasn't?
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't
should
get it.
have.
We should have,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
did not. Okay, that's right. All right, it's just
Water
checking.
under the
Okay.
bridge.
Okay.
But when Pebble Beach did their reclamation plan 30 years ago, the district got how many?
420 acre feet
420
That
acre feet.
evaporated.
that evaporated, exactly.
So we did the financing for the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project in 1992. The project came online in 1994, and we began to develop strategies for allocating some of that water. At the time, Order 9510 came down. The state said, well, you're trying to allocate unlawful water, so your savings is of no use to anyone, so forget the idea. The Pebble Beach Company said, wait, we just invested a huge corporate guarantee and subsidies, that's a taking, basically. And so they were allowed to keep their 380 acre feet, 20 of which went to two other smaller developers in the Del Monte Forest. So they've been playing with 360 acre feet since then. They're down to about 300 of unutilized entitlement. So the state recognized their entitlement, and you can get a meter set with that. You can build a home. You can do a variety of things. Our 420, so by the way, that only adds up to 900, but the average and the way the water rate is set is based on 1,000. We treat it as 1,000 acre feet. But yeah, that 420 just was gone
Went to
overnight.
the river.
Yeah.
Any other questions of staff? Did I open this public comment yet?
I don't remember.
I don't remember
I don't
either.
think you did.
I don't think I did. Okay, so I'd like to open this up for public comment. Anyone Anyone? All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board.
I move to adopt ordinance number 182.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Adams and a second from Director Byrne. Any further discussion from the board? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, it's roll call. It's roll call.
There she is.
I knew that too, and I just jumped the gun. Sorry.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Director Hoffman,
Yes.
Director Adams,
Yes.
Director Burns,
Yes.
and Director Evans.
Yes.
Unanimous approval.
I don't know what's going on tonight. All right, so we'll move on to number 23, receive and confirm water supply forecast for the period of May 1 through September 30, May 1, 2019 through September 30, 2020. Adopt resolution 2019-04 to amend the rationing table XV-4.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We have a brief presentation on this. So every year at May 1st, the board is requested to make a determination if there are adequate supplies in effect to meet the 5 months remaining on the current water year and the full water year coming. So it's basically a 17-month look. And it applies to current and projected water supply and demand. Current or future demand is ruled primarily by the annual budgeting process, which is based on the adjudicated limits on the Seaside Basin and the cease and desist order on the Carmel River. So pretty easy to predict available maximum demand. The system includes, it's the Monterey Peninsula Water Resource System, so it's all surface water, all groundwater in the resource system, which is depicted here as well as in your packet. I've mentioned we consider both CalAm and non-CalAm, so Mr. Turner's question earlier about non-CalAm pumpers does factor in, and it's based on all usable groundwater storage, and the Carmel Valley alluvial aquifer is actually surface water stored in a known indefinite channel, which is, as of May 1st, it's called carryover storage. If there was a shortage, then we would recommend either rationing or water conservation related doctrine that you would adopt to forestall a problem. It's been rainy, as you've seen, so we really don't have a problem. Nevertheless, we're going through this exercise annually to adopt a resolution related to table 15-4 in our rules and regs. So here's what you see as carryover storage as of May 1st, 1,670 acre feet in Los Padres, and then the 3 aquifers, the Upper Carmel Valley, the Lower Carmel Valley, and Seaside. The current total storage is 31,980. That's 85% of usable. Then we look at the pumping load or pumping demand. So the remaining 5 months is the first column of numbers, then the following year. So that's where the non-CalAm 3,046 came from that I mentioned earlier. And the total then becomes your need. So in other words, we have a total need of 19,657 acre feet over the next 17 months against that available storage of 31,980. So there is no capacity constraint looking forward. So again, to reiterate, total usable system storage against I guess we would need 19,000 of carryover storage. So obviously we're in excess of that. So we are sufficient to begin the water year 2020 with a full year's supply. So as such, I want you to receive this forecast and understand that rationing is not required, and recommend adoption of resolution 2019-04 to amend the rationing table 15-4.
Okay, directors, any questions? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment. close public comment and bring back to the board for discussion. Directors?
Move to receive the report?
Second?
Do you,
And adopt the
She's
resolution.
gonna be over
would you
there
like
again.
to amend your motion to adopt the resolution?
Adopt the resolution, sorry.
Thank you, Director.
Resolution 2019-04?
Yes, that
All
one.
right, I'll second that.
Okay, so for clarification, it sounds like we have a motion to receive the report and adopt Resolution 2019-04 made by Director Byrne and seconded by Director Adams. Any further discussion? And this is not a roll call. So, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries 6-0. And we will move on to item number 24, review the, thank you for sticking with me. Review proposed fiscal year 2019 to 2020 district budget and resolution 2019-06.
And we want to put out there that you have a choice on this item. We prepared this before it was decided to have a budget workshop. So you're going to get a lot of it again in the budget workshop. The dates for that, has everyone seen their email yet? Did an email go out?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the email went out with the
So do we
proposed
think
dates.
there's a high degree of likelihood that we will have one in the time span of the 11th, 12th, or 13th of June?
I would ask Arlene what the responses were, or what you've received so far.
One was forwarded to her person that controls her calendar.
I've not heard from all directors, but the date that is looking good is June 13th.
Okay.
Thursday.
Thursday,
And at what time are we planning this?
4 p.m. And I did hear from your office, Mary.
It looks like they agreed.
They responded earlier today.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So yes, it does appear that we will have it in that time frame.
So what I want to offer up to you is, because we would start that with basically the same presentation you're about to get, and then you can drill deeper into where the data came from. If you want to defer this item or continue this item to the special workshop, that would probably spare you some repetition, but it's your call. Suresh is ready.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Could I ask?
You're probably going to say what I'm going to say, so
You
go
go ahead
please.
then.
Please,
You're the chair.
no, please.
I just would like to see if we could poll the audience to see if there was anyone who would be terribly disappointed if we postponed this until the June 11th date.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, is that we should invite the public to participate in this conversation. So was anybody here to discuss the budget or listen to the budget? Or, you paid the full price of admission. Do you want to get all 24 items? Okay,
Looks like we're good.
then I will entertain a motion to continue this to the special workshop,
And
unless Suresh is really disappointed in not being able to present again.
oh,
tonight.
he's working on it all day. He was ready.
I want Director Hoffman to chime in now, so he can take a couple bites of the apple instead of that one meeting.
Don't do that. Do
I'm
not
happy if
do
he's
that.
happy.
I'll
My
move the
goodness.
change in the public hearing on the budget, but I have a comment to make too.
And
I'll
just some
second that.
clarification, we will make sure that we're wired wirelessly so we can pull source numbers if you've got an interest in where things came from. Would you like division managers here, since they kind of built their
Oh,
budgets
yeah.
individually?
Mhm. Somebody got to be beat up.
Well, that's my job,
Uh,
to take it for my guys. So. But since Larry's retiring, you can just,
We'll just blame Larry for
Pile on.
everything.
Well, I'll second that motion since there wasn't a second.
All right, thank you.
oh, that's right, you're out, yeah.
All right, so I do have a motion from Director Riley to continue this to the special budget workshop,
I
and it was
second
seconded by Director Byrne. So further comment?
I just have one comment. I spent 30 minutes or more with Suresh today pursuing a particular number of questions that I had. And I just want to point out that the reimbursement, the carryover, the sequencing of expenditures versus reimbursement, it's the whole reimbursement category, and how you keep track of that. I think it tends to be confusing in the whole budget category. I just alert you to say I'm looking for some explanation and some clarity around how that is, and I just give you a heads up, that's all.
Okay, fair enough. Any other comments?
Lots of questions ready.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'll do to try to hopefully speed up the process for the workshop is that I will put together the comments or questions that I have developed so that you have an opportunity to be prepared. It's supposed to be, not prepared. So, yeah, sure.
Yes, and you may also schedule a session to sit down and talk to
What a
him,
good
as
idea.
Director Riley did, to get any of your, to get an understanding of the budget ahead of time as well.
Not just budget, again, as personalities evolve and new members back or old members are back again and so forth. Director Riley met with Suresh today over certain questions he had. Almost every month, Director Byrne will call me with 1 or 2 or 3 and occasionally 4 or 5. Molly does that. So we're more than happy to always hook you up in advance of a meeting to get clarification of something you read in a packet. So feel free to take advantage of that and we'll get you the right person.
Fantastic. All right, any other further discussion or comments? All right, so we have a motion to continue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries 6-0. If we have nothing further discussion on any informational items or staff reports, then I will adjourn the meeting to the special workshop or to the next meeting?
No,
We just adjourn it.
You have to adjourn.
Okay. Well, then I'll just adjourn.